The sun had begun its slow descent behind the dense Virginia woods, casting long shadows over the encampment of the Union Army. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, smoke from cooking fires, and the faint tang of iron from rifles. Soldiers moved silently between tents, their faces drawn and eyes reflecting a mix of exhaustion and apprehension. Major Sullivan Ballou stood near his tent, adjusting the strap of his sword, though he had long ago stopped relying on it for protection. He stared into the distance where the rolling hills met the fading light, and a shiver of anticipation ran down his spine. The whisper of leaves in the wind sounded almost like the murmurs of ghosts, each rustle reminding him of the countless men who would not survive the coming storm. A young private approached, carrying a stack of papers. "Sir, orders from headquarters," he said, his voice tight, betraying his own unease. Ballou nodded, taking the papers with a careful hand, scanning the inked lines that outlined the strategy for the coming battle. He folded the orders slowly, as if savoring the gravity of the moment. That night, by the flickering light of a tallow candle, Ballou sat at a small wooden desk inside his tent. His hand trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of what he knew he might face. He took a sheet of paper and began to write to his beloved wife, Sarah. "My dearest Sarah," he wrote, each word deliberate, heavy with emotion. "The calm before the storm is upon us. And though I cannot foresee what fate awaits me, I feel compelled to express the depth of my love for you and our family." Outside, the camp was alive with the soft hum of preparation. Men checking muskets, sharpening bayonets, and whispering prayers. Occasionally, the distant sound of a drum echoed through the trees, a constant reminder of the inexorable march toward battle. Ballou paused, listening to the murmurs of the night, imagining Sarah's face and the warmth of home. "My thoughts are consumed by the hope that this conflict will end swiftly," he continued in his letter. "Yet, I am mindful that courage is demanded not only on the battlefield, but in the heart. If I do not return, know that my final moments were spent thinking of you, of the children, and of the life we have built together." Outside the tent, the soldiers huddled in small groups, sharing whispered stories and memories to distract themselves from the approaching dawn. Some spoke of hometowns far away, of mothers and fathers, of sweethearts whose letters they hoped to read soon. Others sat in silence, eyes fixed on the darkened horizon, listening to the crackle of campfires and the occasional neigh of a restless horse. Corporal James Harkins, a man with years of service behind him, walked the perimeter, inspecting the men. "Rest well, lads," he murmured. "Tomorrow, courage will be our shield." His words carried a weight that only those who had seen the horrors of war could understand. In the darkness, shadows of trees stretched like looming specters over the tents, and the distant howl of a wolf, or perhaps a scout, sent a ripple of tension through the camp. Every soldier knew that the sun's rise would bring a reckoning, a test of resolve that no man could escape. Later that evening, Ballou stepped outside the tent, the letter now sealed and tucked safely into his coat. He walked toward the edge of the camp, where the hills rolled gently into a valley. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying with it the faint sounds of distant rifles, perhaps practice shots, or the nervous aim of soldiers trying to steady their hands. He thought of his children, their laughter, their innocence. Could he truly leave them behind? The question gnawed at him, yet he found solace in the belief that his sacrifice, if necessary, would be for the greater good, for the preservation of a nation torn apart. As he returned to the tent, the first stars appeared, tiny pinpricks of light in the vast canvas of night. He placed a hand over his heart and whispered a silent promise that whatever awaited him at Bull Run, his love for Sarah would endure, unbroken, a beacon amidst the darkness of war. The night settled over the camp like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Sleep came fitfully to the men, broken by the chirping of crickets, the rustle of tents, and the occasional groan of an exhausted soldier. Some huddled together for warmth, while others wandered aimlessly, their eyes reflecting a restless anxiety. Major Ballou could not rest. He paced the interior of his tent, the soft glow of a single candle casting flickering shadows across his face. The letter to Sarah weighed on his mind, a reminder of all that he held dear. He ran a hand over his uniform, checking the straps and buttons mechanically, as though preparing himself physically might shield him from the inevitable. Through the canvas, he could hear the whispers of other officers, their voices low and tense as they discussed strategy, rumors, and fears. The distant toll of a bell from a nearby church mingled with the wind, a solemn rhythm marking the passage of time toward dawn. At the edge of the camp, a group of young soldiers gathered around a small fire. Their faces were pale in the firelight, eyes wide with anticipation and dread. One of them, Private Thomas, spoke in a barely audible voice. "Do you think we'll make it through tomorrow?" Corporal Harkins, older and worn by previous campaigns, shook his head slowly. "No man can say. But courage, lad. Courage is what carries us through. Fear is natural. It keeps us alive, but it must never rule our hearts." A silence fell over the group, broken only by the crackle of burning wood. The forest around them seemed alive, shadows stretching unnaturally, trees swaying with a whispering menace. Every rustle of leaves, every distant cry of an animal, sounded amplified in the stillness, as if nature itself held its breath for the coming battle. As the first light of dawn brushed the sky with gray and muted gold, the camp stirred. Men readied their weapons, checked ammunition, and adjusted their packs. The air was thick with tension, each breath heavy with anticipation. Major Ballou mounted his horse, scanning the horizon where the Confederate lines were rumored to be gathering. His heart thumped steadily, not with fear, but with the solemn awareness of duty. Around him, the regiment fell into formation, the synchronized rhythm of boots on earth, a haunting prelude to the chaos soon to come. "Remember your orders," shouted an officer, voice firm but carrying an edge of concern. "Stay together. Watch your comrades. Trust in your training." Ballou's eyes met those of his men, young and inexperienced, their faces pale yet determined. He offered a brief nod, a silent encouragement. Inside, he felt the swell of conflicting emotions: pride, apprehension, and an almost unbearable longing for home. The march toward Bull Run began in eerie silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of underbrush and the clatter of musket barrels. The regiment advanced cautiously, eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of the enemy. Suddenly, a single gunshot rang out, followed by another. The tension exploded into a cacophony of noise. Rifles cracked, men shouted, horses neighed in panic. Smoke curled through the trees, obscuring vision and turning the morning into a haze of gray and chaos. Ballou urged his men forward, his voice carrying over the din. "Hold the line! Steady!" He fought to remain calm, to inspire courage in those around him, even as the world around him became a blur of movement, fear, and adrenaline. Amidst the chaos, he caught sight of Private Thomas, the young man from the campfire, faltering under the pressure of combat. Ballou reached him, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Focus, lad. Watch me. We fight together." Thomas nodded, swallowing his terror, and readjusted his grip on his rifle. As the battle raged, Ballou's thoughts returned to Sarah. He remembered the way she smiled when he returned from past campaigns, the quiet strength in her voice, the comfort of her letters. He knew that each decision he made on this field could determine not only his fate, but that of countless men. The regiment pushed forward, driven by discipline and sheer will. The sounds of musket fire, shouted commands, and the groans of the wounded filled the valley. Every step was a struggle, every breath a reminder of the stakes at hand. Yet even in the terror of battle, Ballou felt a strange clarity, a sense of purpose rooted in honor, love, and the unwavering commitment to duty. By midday, the regiment held its ground, battered but resolute. Smoke and dust hung thick in the air, obscuring the battlefield and adding to the sense of disorientation. Ballou dismounted, moving among his men, offering encouragement, calming fears, and making split-second decisions that could mean life or death. The sun climbed higher, burning through the smoke and haze that blanketed the battlefield. Musket fire crackled like relentless thunder, and the groans of men reached a constant, haunting rhythm. Amid the chaos, Major Sullivan Ballou moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the lines of his regiment, ensuring order amidst the bedlam. Every step was a test of resolve. The earth was churned to mud by horses and men, the once green grass now trampled and streaked with dirt. Shouts and commands overlapped with cries of fear and pain. Yet Ballou's gaze remained focused, not on the carnage, but on the men he led, the young soldiers whose courage was just as fragile as it was fierce. "Form up!" he shouted, voice cutting through smoke. "Hold steady! We will not falter!" Beside him, Private Thomas stumbled, exhausted and shaken. Ballou gripped his arm, steadying him. "We endure. Every moment we endure brings us closer to survival. Watch me, lad. Keep your nerve." Amid the roar of combat, Ballou's mind drifted to Sarah. The letter he had written seemed to pulse in his coat pocket, a tangible reminder of home and love. He could almost hear her voice, soft and steady, urging him to survive, urging him to hold fast. He thought of the children, their laughter echoing through his memory like a fragile shield against despair. Each face, each memory, became a source of strength. Even as bullets whistled past and smoke burned his eyes, he felt the profound weight of duty, not only to his country and his regiment, but to the life he might leave behind. The battle surged like a living, breathing entity. One moment his regiment advanced, the next they were forced back, grappling with the enemy across open fields. Horses reared, men fell, and the air was thick with tension, so palpable it pressed against the chest like iron. Ballou noticed a gap forming in their line and charged forward, rallying his men. "Hold the ground! For honor! For your comrades!" His words, carried by desperation and resolve, lifted weary spirits. Soldiers who were moments before paralyzed by fear found courage in his steadfastness, a beacon amidst chaos. The enemy pressed relentlessly, yet Ballou's regiment endured, step by agonizing step. Every movement demanded careful calculation, every command a balancing act between life and death. As the afternoon waned, fatigue began to gnaw at the men. Sweat and soot streaked their faces. Their arms ached, their lungs burned. Private Thomas leaned heavily on his rifle, whispering a prayer to himself. Ballou approached, placing a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Courage is not the absence of fear," he said quietly, almost to himself as much as to Thomas. "It is the resolve to act despite it. Hold firm. We endure together." The words were simple, yet in the midst of thunderous gunfire and the stench of gunpowder, they carried a weight that fortified the weary soldiers' spirits. As the battle raged on, Ballou found a brief, fleeting moment of quiet behind a fallen tree. He pulled the letter from his coat pocket, the parchment creased and slightly soiled from the march. He held it to his chest, drawing strength from the words he had written to Sarah hours before. "My love for you is eternal," he whispered, voice barely audible over the distant gunfire. "If this is my final hour, know that it is filled with thoughts of you and the children. Our bond transcends this battlefield, beyond life itself." He tucked the letter back into his coat, a solemn promise that his devotion would endure, even if the fates were cruel. The battlefield seemed to stretch endlessly, each hill and hollow hiding unseen dangers. Smoke thickened, mingling with the cries of men and the pounding of hooves. Every step forward carried uncertainty, every glance over the shoulder a reminder that life could end in an instant. Ballou pressed on with his regiment, a pillar of resolve, though his heart pounded. As evening approached, the battle's intensity began to ebb, though the cost was evident. Men leaned on one another, exhausted yet unbroken. Ballou surveyed the field, noting both the bravery and the fragility of those who remained. Though the outcome of the day was uncertain, and though the smoke and chaos obscured what lay ahead, one truth remained clear. The letter he had written would reach Sarah, carrying a message of unwavering love and sacrifice. With the sun dipping below the horizon, Ballou mounted his horse once more, scanning the terrain. The wind carried distant echoes of battle and the faint, haunting cry of the wounded. He tightened his grip on the reins, eyes forward, heart resolved. Somewhere beyond the smoke and fear, hope endured. And though the story of this day would be remembered in fragments of courage and sorrow, the essence of love, sacrifice, and the human spirit remained unbroken, a promise whispered into the wind, leaving the future uncertain, yet profoundly alive.